Wow, it feels so dystopian.
Now, as you can probably tell, we are in quite the cavernous structure. If you've lived in Singapore, chances are you might have seen this place, but very few people have actually been in here. Now, what you might not know is that this place was once the nerve center powering our entire nation.
Time travel back 60 years, Singapore was at the doorstep of its industrial leap. And this semi-ruined structure, the Pasir Panjang Power Station, was the fulcrum upon which the success or failure of the nation hinged. But it was built amid challenging times.
He was carrying with him quite a significant amount of explosives. He was definitely targeting this power station.
Imagine there was a lot of shit and a lot of noise. The baptism of fire we had to go through. We were all new, young engineers trying to make things work.
Of course, they are angry. The workers are not taking this course of action in a frivolous way.
Living on the very edge of reclaimed land for perhaps the majority of my life, I've always had a very vested interest in understanding more about Singapore's quest for more land. With me here is a map of Singapore back in the 1950s, and here, a map of Singapore today. Well, the question is, why expand?
On closer look, occupying most of this engineered land are structures belonging to industries, ranging from petrochemicals to logistics, oil refining and maritime services. All of them with history dating back to the country's industrial days of the 50s and 60s. I wonder what sparked this growth. To find out more, I'm meeting Koh Buck Song, an author of several books on Singapore's history. It looks like he's taking me to someplace mysterious. This is a spot near Singapore's southern coast.
Buck Song, why have you brought me to this place today?
And this spot is special because right out here we see Keppel Harbour, the center of the thriving port of Singapore from colonial times. And this spot in 1879 was the only place in Singapore that had electricity.
Was there a reason why?
The Tanjong Pagar Dock Company started to invest in generating its own electricity to enable the port to function round the clock. It was started by the private sector, but the municipal government saw the obvious benefits of electricity, and the dock company soon became a state agency, the Tanjong Pagar Dock Board.
The board built a small-scale power station at Mackenzie Road in 1906, ushering in the first era of power generation. And for the first time, electric lighting came on in the streets and tramways were introduced. With the possibilities that electricity sparked, it was a matter of time before the city's needs outgrew the station's capacity, leading to the colonial government's first foray into a power station of larger magnitude, the St. James Power Station. Buck Song explains that in 1930, St. James powered the country's first traffic signals at Emperor's Place, and in 1939 enabled Cathay Cinema to open its first air-conditioned outlet. But post-war St. James was left in a grave state. Recovery could not wait. Singapore's economy needed its port and industrial facilities back up. The hunger for electricity doubled to 37,000 consumers between 1938 and 1949. Singapore was desperate for a second power station, one that would later become the most powerful ever to be constructed in Asia then. Ushering the nation's industrial revolution, two imposing red brick structures that dominate the southern skyline. The Pasir Panjang Power Station A, built in 1953, and Pasir Panjang Power Station B, built in 1966. Spanning over 21 football fields of 15 hectares. Comprising of 4 10,000-ton oil storage tanks, living quarters, and jetties, costing $28 million, or in today's context, around $585 million to build.
How significant was the Pasir Panjang Power Station?
Before the station was opened, brownouts and blackouts were common.
Brownouts?
Brownouts are temporary breaks in supply.
Right, okay.
Street hawkers used kerosene lamps at night, and households would always have candles on standby.
Right.
In 1953, when the station opened, it generated more electricity in 1 hour than was generated for an entire year just 50 years before.
Wow. And that was essentially an entire change in your lifestyle.
That's right, and that's because this station was the biggest and most efficient in the Far East. And because of that, it was able to spark Singapore's industrial development.
Bak Song shares that this engineering and mechanical triumph was unheard of in Asia for its time, with dignitaries describing it as the beginning of a new future. The station signaled to the public the unrestricted use of electricity in their homes, and to industries, an assurance that they could depend on the supply of electricity 24/7.
You can see clearly where the different parts of the station used to be. The three main parts: the control room, the turbine room where we are, and the boiler room to this side. Pasir Panjang Power Station was the first oil-fired power plant, which means that it generated electricity by burning oil in order to create heat.
Bak Song explains that the heat from the burning oil was used to boil water in the boiler, which turned to steam. The high-pressure steam was then sent through pipes into a turbo alternator consisting of a turbine that spun at 3,000 revolutions per minute, converting mechanical energy into electricity. Each turbo alternator was imported from the United Kingdom at an average cost of 2.7 million Singapore dollars each. That's approximately over $40 million today. This was the first state-of-the-art equipment in permanent operation in the entire Commonwealth. What Bak Song shared earlier has really brought this place to life for me.
It's fascinating to think that in just a period of 50 to 60 years, Singapore went from a single light source at the Tanjung Pagar wharves to essentially powering an entire nation, not just domestically, but also industrially.
What did it take to construct a building of such monumental scale under the immense socio-economic pressure of the 1950s? I'm meeting Wing Hin, conservation specialist and building heritage advocate, to find out more. We meet at Pasir Panjang Power Station A.
Post-war England, a new government came into power and they have to take care of post-war reconstruction, right? Not just in the home country, but also in the colonies. So they had a very ambitious building program in housing, in education, and in healthcare. And all these facilities and infrastructure needs power. The important thing was to address this scarcity of resources. Everywhere, all over the world, countries are scrambling to rebuild their cities. In fact, our post-war governor, Nicole, he had to bang his table in the House of Parliament to ask for funds, to help Singapore develop after the war. To meet that challenge, the building actually had to be designed to be built quickly, economically.
What was the lay of the land like back then?
You can actually see the outcrop with the large apartment blocks built there. So the layout of the land is really quite rugged and rocky, and there probably clumps of mangroves. To design a fully working power station with its own oil storage, boilers, turbine rooms, right, and its own jetties, it had to lop off an entire hill to level the land.
Almost like a mini land reclamation project. What was the design thinking behind that?
A power station design is an interesting cross between engineering and architecture, right? It is a piece of engineering because nothing in the design should be extraneous. They should actually be facilitating the industrial process. But they took the trouble to articulate the facade in brick and to look like a proper, dignified building. So not forgetting how people arrive in Singapore, a lot of them still arrive by the sea. This is one of the buildings they might see. So it has to look proper.
Wing Hin shares that millions of locally made bricks were laid individually, a facade choice considered more economical back then than concrete. But this required manpower. Short on skilled labour post-war, the local government also relaxed immigration policies to speed up the construction. The second most crucial material, steel. 3,800 tons of it, equivalent to the weight of over 2,500 average-sized cars.
Why steel?
Steel has the capacity to span large spaces. So we are building here for large machines. There are a number of stories high and quite possibly more than 10 meters wide, right?
Sure.
So we can't afford to use a conventional building system, either structural masonry like brick, or timber or concrete that actually have shorter spans. So the second reason is steel can be fabricated off-site and be assembled on-site very quickly. Steel fulfills both criteria, create large column-free spaces internally, as well as meet the timeline for the completion of construction.
Right. Where was all this steel sourced from?
You can see very visibly on this column, or this girder, the mark of British steel. Steel manufacturing and export actually was a large percentage of UK's gross domestic product post-war. So what better to actually export all over the British Empire, right, to get back some revenue. And some might say it generates further dependence of the colonies on the home country.
It was an effort that required labour from all the British colonies. Architects and engineers from the United Kingdom, steel riggers from India, bricklayers and carpenters from Hong Kong. Work went on day and night unceasingly, rain or shine.
So after hearing all this, how long do you think it took to build this power station?
4 years, conservative.
It's actually half the time. 2 years, a little less than 2 years. Struggling with tight resources, availability of materials, and a very punishing schedule. And not to mention, we have to keep up with the demand for electricity that keep on growing year on year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of planning and discipline, I would say, and professionalism to execute this project.
It's like chills running down my spine at this point.
I can't begin to fathom the sheer human effort it took to build this. And it's got me thinking, it must have taken a huge workforce to operate. As they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Just who were these people keeping everything running? With a newly minted power station up and running, Singapore dared to dream of a brighter future. 1959, the nation was gearing towards self-governance away from colonial rule. The dominant party had a bold vision to put Singapore on the map. The plan, a 10-year development blueprint centered around industrialization.
The success of these programs and policies depended on Singapore's ability to bring not just electricity, but reliable electricity to its people and the industries.
I meet Ko Pak Wan, a heritage guide at a building that sits right next to the station.
What exactly was the building catered for?
We can look at this article from 1952. Here it is, it talks about super quarters for powermen. So what it was actually a 12-story block that was actually constructed to house the senior officers who will be working for the power station. So in total, there were about 42 2 to 3 bedroom flats to house senior officers and their families, and then 8 mess halls for singles.
So for them to build a 12-story building back in the day, it must have been pretty grand.
Grand is an understatement, because the plan in 1952 stated that there will be swimming pools, there will be terraces, there will be communal gardens.
Standing 38 meters tall, each unit was to have a large terrace, lounge and dining room. Living perks even included a promenade along the beach, a children's playground and penthouses on the top story.
So what about the rest? The other workers, were they housed in the same area?
They were not forgotten. Actually, this plan that we have here demarcated for the construction of housing for junior officers, right? And then on this side, we have a section that's actually marked out for housing the laborers, but they've since then been demolished, unfortunately.
There were in total 5 high-rise blocks and 5 3-story blocks rented out to daily rated laborers.
Is there a reason why the quarters were built so close?
Well, it wasn't important to keep the station running 24/7. Housing was actually functional in that sense, to actually have people staying and working nearby so they can get to work quickly. Yeah, at one time, there were 300 daily wage workers and their families living in there.
To live and work in a plot that spanned 50 hectares, it must have been quite a small, bustling settlement. What I find more interesting is the fact that it was a melting pot of cultures. How was it like for all these cultures to live in close proximity of each other?
Multiple call-outs on socials and emails later, I'm visiting Pathma Janagaran's home. She spent the first 12 years of her life in the living quarters near the plant.
Oh wow, are these pictures of your dad?
Yes, it's my dad who was working the power substation. He was a turbine driver.
Okay.
It's not that kind of driver.
Pathma tells me that a turbine driver is responsible for the operation and maintenance of the turbine generators, the main engines that turn steam into electricity.
His job is challenging. He must be alert, visual. If he doesn't run smoothly, there was the machine breakdown, there was blackouts.
Sure.
They have to put it back as soon as possible.
What was his working hours like?
9 hours and 6 days work. If one day he falls sick or he doesn't want to work, there will be no pay.
I'm assuming, Pathma, that you didn't get to see Dad very much.
Yes, he was the family provider.
In a career spanning 35 years, Pathma's father started out as a labourer. He then worked his way up and was promoted to turbine driver in 1969. Shortly after which, he moved his family to the quarters next to the plant.
How was the community like that?
Oh, the community is great. From age 4 to 12, we all come down and mix together.
Really?
Boys and girls will play the football. Some of them, like me, like to play Supatakraw.
How many kids, roughly?
It's more than 20. And they're all the different races. Eurasians, Indians, Chinese, Malay. There's a lot of food vendors. One whole day, there will be food will coming in and out. There's one old Sing man with a turban. And he used the horn to press pop, 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 pop. Sells a triangle, curry puff. All the kids like me, we will run down with our 20-cent coins.
So why did you eventually move away?
And that's the time Singapore was developing fast, and the Housing Development Board started to build a lot of houses. And that's where my father was encouraged by the supervisors, everyone, to apply for a new house, which this is owned by us. I wish I can go back.
Yeah, me too.
I really missed my childhood and the kampung spirit.
So beloved were the living quarters that in 2017, over 500 ex-residents gathered to bid farewell to the building they once lived in for one last time. Families whose fathers worked in jobs ranging from handymen to mechanics and electricians. One of the pivotal roles at the Pasir Panjang Power Station was engineers. I meet 82-year-old ex-engineer Mr. Lau Ganing at the station, which is currently being repurposed into an event space. Joining the plant a year after Singapore achieved self-governance in 1960, he was one of the pioneering members of an all-Singaporean team.
The rush of memories come back. I remember very vividly my colleagues, the struggles. So imagine there was a lot of shit and a lot of noise. So when we wore our white overalls, usually it's drenching wet with perspiration. The noise level exceeded the threshold. You can see I'm wearing the hearing aid. The baptism of fire we had to go through. We were all new, young engineers trying to make things work.
Mr. Lau tells me that a workforce of 300 skilled and unskilled workers in 3 rotating shifts were in charge of keeping the station running. His engineering team, who oversaw maintenance and operation of key equipment in the control room, turbine room, and boiler room, wore white overalls. Foremen and technicians wore grey, while daily rated workers like handyman, machinists, electricians, and cleaners wore blue. I learned from Mr. Lau that all his predecessors were British, and they had left the local teams without guidance once the colonial government announced its withdrawal from Singapore. Despite it, his engineering team had to deliver, especially on the backs of an unrelenting public demand for electricity.
It was really intense pressure on ourselves in the power stations. We have to shut down some plants over the weekend. We can do a quick shutdown, quick repair. Monday morning is when everybody comes back to office. We have to bring the machines that were shut down back on Monday morning. We have to start projects at 3 a.m. And we as engineers, of course, everybody heard of the Monday syndrome.
What would happen if something went wrong?
If we cannot rescue the situation, put right, then you have a blackout. So if you go back to 1970s, there were 2 major blackouts in Singapore. All hands on deck.
1974, Singapore plunged into darkness for the second time in 4 days for 3.5 hours due to a technical fault. The island was home to 2 million people then. Hundreds of residents were trapped in lifts. Traffic jams built up across the country. 1976, the longest blackout, at 6 hours in various parts of the country due to generator failure, affecting the ports, factories, hospitals, and businesses.
After a trip, we just got one phone call from Prime Minister's office. Just one phone call is enough to tell us it must not happen again. That gave rise to a huge program to put the cables in the CBD area in concrete trenches. Nobody can dig through the concrete, but you see the reliability that you see in your lifetime.
It's no wonder that Mr. Lau's generation is honoured as the pioneer generation. His team truly laid the groundwork for modern Singapore. But keeping this electrical beast running 24/7 wasn't solely for public consumption. A big energy guzzler was industry, which makes me wonder, what were the power-hungry industries driving such relentless energy needs? And are there still landmarks around that reveal this hidden past? The 1960s, the young nation's survival depended on the success of Singapore's quest to industrialise, and industrialise fast.
Factories are going up fast, and a number have already started production.
The local electricity demand trebled from 1951 to 1965. So much so that another power station within the Pasir Panjang Power Plant had to be built. Standing adjacent to Station A is Pasir Panjang Power Station B, that was opened in 1965. With both stations combined, the plant could power around 4 million street lamps for 24 hours straight. In 1961, the Economic Development Board, or EDB, was formed to attract new industries and international investments into Singapore. This agency was tasked with laying the groundwork for Singapore's upcoming industrial and economic transformation.
And in just a few years, Singapore becomes the epicenter of manufacturing, from television sets to garments. Now, right here, you see a rather interesting artifact. This dates back to 1961, and it's actually the pioneering certificate awarded to Shell Bukom.
The EDB handed out these certificates to the first movers in specific industries. The Royal Dutch Shell was the first foreign investor to receive this certificate, setting up the nation's first oil refinery in Pulau Bukom on 26 July 1961.
In fact, it also awarded its 13th pioneering certificate to the Shell Lubrication Plant in Woodlands.
A lubricant plant is where lubricants, such as oils and various types of grease, are manufactured, processed, and packaged for use in different engines and machinery. These lubricants are essential for reducing friction, protecting parts from wear and tear, and corrosion. I never knew there was a Shell plant like this in Singapore. As it is currently closed to the public, I've reached out to a couple who visited the site recently. They've asked to meet me here, the closest address on the map.
It's so hard to find this place, honestly. You have access to get in there.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so thanks to the authorities, this was also a place where we actually managed to hold our wedding at.
You had your wedding here?
Yeah, so we actually like to explore abandoned places in Singapore.
Sure.
So we just thought that, you know, what better place to hold our wedding than an abandoned place itself. Yeah. Kind of like a race against time, you would say, to capture these places and explore them before they are really gone for good.
Yeah, its days are probably numbered, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Well, let's document it before it disappears.
Yeah.
Right.
The Singapore Land Authority, or SLA, has given us special permission to explore the former plant today. I learned that this 5-hectare plot, spanning around 10 football fields, was the only industry in Woodlands when it first opened in 1963. While the scale might not be considered mind-blowing in today's landscape, this plant was actually one of Shell's largest lubricating plants worldwide in the 1960s.
It feels like I'm in a post-apocalyptic video game.
We actually had our wedding right here.
Okay.
At the warehouse.
That's pretty awesome.
So fun fact, if we dial it back 60 years, this was actually where former Minister Gulton Swee actually gave his opening ceremony back in 1963.
Yeah, it looks like quite an international affair. You have these men in suits.
Probably was one of the most high-tech, plants at its time.
Shell's pioneering move set off a wave of new entrants. Esso, Caltex and Castrol all wanted a piece of the Singapore pie. So they opened their own plants in the years shortly after. Looking at the current neglected state of the facility makes me curious as to what it was like back at its peak. I meet with Ian Dakota, a former grease production manager at the tank farm. He tells me the facility is made up of 4 main areas: the tank farm, the blending facility, the filling warehouse, and the quality control laboratory. At its peak, there were over 200 personnel working in the facility. He's still a Shell employee today, so he's the right person to give me a detailed breakdown of the operations back then.
You were here once upon a time. How was it like in those days?
This place was very hectic. We used to make a wide range of lubricants. We had automotive oils for cars, trucks, and buses. You have industrial oils for machines in factories. We also used to make lubricants for a power plant or a ship's engine, and that required the different components to be stored in the many tanks that you see.
What about all these pipes here?
So this is the tank farm where you have all the connections, piping connections. Think of it like veins, yeah, connecting different parts of the body. So oil would flow and additive would flow through these pipes to whichever destination you were pumping to. So we had to make the right connections.
Can you tell me how lubricant oils, how are they made?
Well, it's a lot like instant coffee. For example, the base oils you can consider like the water. And then you have the additives, which is like your 3-in-1 coffee mix. You need the right amount of water and the right amount of additive to be measured and then mixed. So you need to dispense the base oil, dispense the additives into a blending equipment or a blending tank.
I'm very curious to actually see the equipment that's responsible for all of this. Is there a way we could have a look at that?
Let's get into the beating heart of the plant.
Ian leaves me in the safe hands of Moshin Kamis, a man who served for 20 years at this plant. The station that he worked at the longest was at the blending top, the area where raw base oils and additives were mixed together to create lubricants.
So, Reuben, how do you go?
Tired, very tired. 4 stories. You guys were doing this every day?
Every day. Wow. Every day we go and climb up and down.
So this entire setup is where you pretty much blend the different oils together?
Yes. We will supply the oil to the blending bottom via the hose. So we will connect to the tanks, the base oil tank, to the respective blending tank.
You had to manually connect everything?
This is a manual plant.
Sure.
We will need to connect the hose, and it's going to be very busy. People started calling you to stop the pumps.
Compared to most lubricant plants today that utilize automation to flush, connect, and dispense oils through the pipes, the operations of the Woodlands plant was an entirely hands-on effort at every stage of the process.
We have to be very careful. We have to be sure that we are connected to the right tank, to the right pipeline.
What happens if you get something wrong?
That would be bad news, contamination.
Pretty much the entire substance, all the oil would be ruined.
We have to make sure that our product is RFT, right first time.
This plant produced over 120 grades of oil, dispatched to clients in over 40 countries. At its height, it produced over 4 Olympic-sized pools of lubricants a year. The plant's last year of production was 2017. With Woodlands slated for redevelopment, the plant moved its entire operation to Tuas.
You know, I never quite realized how crucial lubricating oil was in the various industries back in the day, and much less the fact that it was crucial in building our nation.
After Shell entered the picture, Woodlands saw a wave of new entrants taking over hectares of land. They were mostly small and medium-sized manufacturing enterprises, ranging from food chemicals to watches. By the 1980s, Woodlands transformed into a densely populated housing and industrial estate. But I'm curious to know if industry took the woods out of Woodlands. Moshin tells me to head to this hawker center he used to frequent. It's one of the oldest hawker centers in Woodlands that was opened in 1975. And it's a 5-minute drive from the Shell plant.
So I'm trying to find out how the lay of the land was here back in the day. I think the best way to find that out is to go and speak to someone at the hawker center. 你们这边最老的店是在哪里呢？都不懂啊。你们这边最老的店是在哪里呢？
这个业绩咯。
I find F&B old-timer 85-year-old Auntie Chen. She's been selling chicken rice here since the hawker center first opened.
单位是我政府配给我的深圳的嘛。我们就全部搬来这边，也是不是很好了。本来以前是全部是大雾、沙泥雾，就是来这边就是没有什么没有地铁啊，什么都没有，前没这条路也是没有办法。现在走路多了，工厂也多了，比较好。
I learned that the hawker center was part of a national vision formed in 1966 to develop Woodlands into the largest satellite town in the country, boasting good quality of life and numerous job opportunities in various industries.
他们这边做工的嘛，很多全部工厂嘞，
所以他们全部都来这边吃啦。
现在什么都方便，越来人越多嘛，每个人都希望说越来越生意越好，赚钱都好，是吗？
It's heartwarming to know the industry has indirectly helped businesses like anti-colonial to thrive. But if history serves me right, the road to industrialization wasn't always a straightforward one. The 1950s to the 60s, the decade ushering in Singapore's Industrial Revolution, was also one marred by political and social instability, leading to a series of strikes. What was the cause of these uprisings for the nation? The 1950s to the mid-1960s. Singapore was marred by political turmoil and social unrest during its transition from colonial rule to independence. Anti-colonial fervour, fears of communism and racial tensions fueled the discord. Rival political parties, some with communist sympathies, engaged with labour movements to amplify their cause. Amid the chaos, workers rose in a wave of strikes, demanding higher wages and better welfare. Critical sectors affected included nursing, public utilities and manufacturing. Hampering business operations, spooking investors, and crippling an economy heavily reliant on trade and manufacturing. The blackest year saw Singapore hit a record of 271 strikes, with financial losses running into the millions. The Pasir Panjang Power Station was not spared. Was the flow of electricity across the country affected as a result? I meet Dr. Lokar Singh to find out more. He's a historian and an authority on the history of the labour movement in Singapore. Where exactly are we?
Here we are in the pay office for the workers of the power station. So especially important for the daily rated workers because they are going to be paid at the end of their shift. Daily rated workers, they are not on the permanent payroll of the company.
Daily rated employees, or DREs, have been part of the nation's workforce from colonial times to as recent as 2021. They are the backbone behind cleaning, maintaining, and the running of Singapore's public services.
How much were they being paid at the time?
Very, very low in the 1950s. Some of them were being paid $4.50 a day.
I learned that it's the equivalent of about $20 today.
Is it even enough?
$4.50 was definitely not enough.
Who's protecting them and their interests?
To the great credit of the union movement that they managed to unionize the daily rated workers. They realized that it's not enough to come together as Pasir Panjang. You have to come together as the entire public sector.
Kar Singh tells me there were over 100 trade unions in Singapore throughout the 50s, providing marginalized workers with a unified platform to raise their grievances. We head to the exact spot where a strike once broke out.
This is of a strike in 1954 by the electrical workers of the City Council.
Here you can see the city, was it
City Council forced us to strike.
Forced us to strike?
Of course they are angry. The workers are not taking this course of action in a frivolous way.
What were they demonstrating for?
Number of things, better wages, and they are demanding that the working conditions, they are safe for them, the benefits, sick leave, overtime, bonus, holidays, you know? They don't have any of those things.
It is said that a strike broke out almost every day in the year of 1955. As a result of the unrest, the government came to the table in 1965, opening a trade union house and forming the National Trade Union Tripartite Movement. It created a framework allowing the government, businesses, and unions to work together to resolve labor disputes and address challenges.
Trade unions play a very important role in Singapore's history. They got the employers and the government to recognize that the unions and workers must be part of that tripartite relationship. These were the workers. They put their jobs on the line to go on strike, so they paved the way, you know, for the workers of subsequent generations.
But worker-employer disputes weren't the only issue facing Singapore society during that period. Brewing beneath the surface, Konfrontasi. A 3-year undeclared war with Indonesia. Born out of anti-colonial sentiment and the fear of the political union between Malaya, Singapore, Sarawak and Sabah, known as the Federation of Malaysia in 1963, President Sukarno saw the move as a threat to Indonesia and the region. A violent campaign was launched to destabilise this union. One of the targets being core infrastructure, with Pasir Panjang Power Station as the perfect mark. Professor Kumar, an expert in terrorism in Southeast Asia, shares more at a spot where the Singapore military once patrolled the plant.
Why target these key infrastructure?
Key and critical infrastructure installations were targeted because they played a very important role in maintaining the economy as well as the daily functioning of everyday life. If you strike the power station, you will paralyze the society, you paralyze the government, you paralyze the security forces, which means the enemy can come in and cause havoc. Electricity would have been cut for weeks, if not months, because this was a very strategic facility for generating power for the economy and households. Livelihoods would have been disrupted.
In the 3-year period between 1963 and 1965, an estimated 40 terror attacks were perpetrated. The most devastating, Singapore's first air-conditioned commercial building, McDonald House. 3 dead, 33 injured.
How close did they get to blowing up this very power station that we're looking at?
The security at that time for this place was very, very tight. Military forces were deployed here around the clock to defend this place against attacks. There was one occasion where an Indonesian agent in civilian clothing managed to come close, but because of the very tight security, he couldn't make it through. On another occasion, there was an Indonesian agent who had actually come in by sea, and he was carrying with him quite a significant amount of explosives. He was definitely targeting this power station, but fortunately, he was identified and detained at a roadblock.
If the terrorists were successful, the consequences socially, politically, economically would have been devastating. And after learning about the efforts required to build this very building and the determination to power and maintain it, I'm just very grateful that nothing actually happened here.
The Pasir Panjang Power Station looks radically different tonight. Its current tenant, 24 Owls, has been organizing events here, ranging from big musical acts to product launches since 2003. Today's event is a concert that looks to promote introspection through art and sound.
Why this concert in this space?
I think performance spaces there are a lot, but places like that are scarce.
It's almost like a blank space for you to let your creativity run wild to do what you want to do. It was decommissioned, and after that, it has been left empty for a very long while.
Do you feel like the history does a little bit of enticing as well?
It just builds up a lot of thoughts, what they're going to experience, and the moment they walk in, it's like, wow, what's happening here? Is this Singapore?
It explains a lot of the character of the events that we produce. Authenticity and, raw, and a space that's ready to be discovered.
While a new lease of life has been given to this power station, its fate still hangs in the balance. The entire southern waterfront of Singapore, which extends from Pasir Panjang to Marina East, has been slated for redevelopment.
In a glittery, ultra-modern skyline like Singapore's, I've come to see the Pasir Panjang Power Station as a reminder of how far we've come as a nation. Through this journey, I've seen it as a symbol of progress and resilience. And it's just so surreal to know that the very ground I'm standing on once represented the nation's hopes, ambitions, and vision. And despite all that we've discovered, I'm very sure there lies nuggets waiting to be uncovered that we can look back on as a guiding light for our future.
In the next episode, I uncover the secrets that have quietly shaped communities for over a century.